what an act to follow. Mac, you can kind of see it as your cheerleader team, I guess. You can see it as your cheerleader team, probably the best introduction any speaker can wish for. So next up is Mac, and he's going to talk about something that I have really been looking forward to, and that is to champion a new story of sustainability, something that I think and believe has been needed for quite a long time. So give Mac a warm welcome.
14 years ago, a telephone rang, and it was a client of mine, a large multinational, and they invited me to come and join a conversation with some of the senior executives of that business on what is our global purpose. I was flattered and appreciated and, very happy to join this conversation. And I was imagining, if you had a clean sheet of paper and to say, what is the global purpose of our organization, was a time of enormous opportunity. And when I traveled to their headquarters and I went into the meeting, I entered the room and there was about 20 of them sat in there, and you could feel the mood of the room. It was depressed. It was rather downcast. It was bored and it was indifferent. And people were just doodling on bits of paper and playing with their phones. And I asked as I sat down, why do we have this mood of disinterest, of indifference? And one of them looked up from his head and said, well, we all know what the global purpose of our organization is. It is to stuff money in shareholders' pockets. So what is there to talk about? Now, we engaged a conversation during that meeting when we began to imagine what might this multinational be. If it said our purpose goes beyond shareholder value, it goes beyond profit, beyond growth, and we name a purpose that serves the world, that serves the needs of the world at this critical and crucial time. And the meeting became animated and excited, and suddenly we created a document that really spelt a vision of business as a force for positive good in the world. And the means to achieve this was the ongoing commercial success of this business, but orientated to the vision of being in service to the world. Now, that document went up to the executive, and there it was sort of mixed up a little bit and edited, and then a few words chopped out and a few added in, and then it went through a further process of evaluation and rewriting, and ultimately, after about 2 weeks, it re-emerged, and it looked nothing like the original document. It was no longer inspiring, and everybody was back to doodling on their bits of paper and playing with their phones because the opportunity had gone. Now, in the meantime, we are becoming, I believe, year on year, more and more aware that we are walking our way into an extraordinary time in the history of our species. Whether we look at what is happening in the worlds of technology, of economics and economies, whether we're looking at the environment or socially, we would have to be determined not to see what is so evident and there before our eyes, is that we are at a crossroads. To take just one, which is the whole global warming and the whole issues around that, or the massive population surge that we are seeing, or what is happening to our seas, or the famine that is now deepening in Sudan and in so many other fragile areas, all of us are aware of the extraordinary political and cultural events happening around the world, which are threatening this peaceful, prosperous, more beautiful future that we imagine. Now, something like 40 years ago now, I went looking for some people that could teach me about the things that I loved. And the things that I loved are our forests and our streams, our communities of people with their children and families, enjoying an evening and eating together, cooking together, of dancers like our Zumba dancers, of people just being people and loving all the things that all people of all nations love. And I found my way to being mentored by a group of indigenous people, Native American people. And I learned from them for 20 years. They were teaching me and educating me, whilst at the same time, I was also engaging my business as a consultant and around leadership with businesses. And those people said to me, they said, you know, there is a kind of insanity that has swept its way around the world. That makes us believe that things which are of extraordinary value, which we would call sacred, are really simply just there for us to use and serve our needs as human beings, but have no value beyond that. But Mac, you must understand that water is the true gold, and that there is nothing more precious on this earth than our children, for they are our future. So you tell me, Mac, why we would ever create businesses who place shareholder value, maximizing profit and growth as the primary things around which that business is orientated, and not the future of those self-same children. The dedication towards ensuring that there is clean water available to people all around the world, that there is sufficient food to drink, for water and food and shelter and community are all the things which we work in our jobs to earn the money to enjoy. It seems to me that this situation is becoming daily more acute as we march along this road. And they said to me, we're going to share with you something. We're going to share with you a little piece of our history, of our ancient history. We don't know how old it is, but it is very old. And we call it the children's fire. When our councils of chiefs, women and men, used to sit together in council, creating laws for the people, making decisions that would affect the people. In other words, leaders. One of them raised the question, how can we ensure that our leaders serve the best interests of the people whom we lead, our nation? How can we ensure that they do that and do not end up creating things which serve only their own self-interests or the interests of their own small sort of enterprise? And someone came up with the idea that in the middle of the council circle would be kindled a little fire that would burn in the center of the council of chiefs, and this would be called the children's fire. And each of the chiefs, when they took a seat in the council, would have to make a pledge to the children's fire that in their contributions to the council's work, no decision, no law, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted that will harm the children. And then later was added 7 generations to come. And they said to me, can you imagine what would happen if the businesses around our world made that same pledge? If the leaders, and when I say leaders, by the way, I'm not just talking about the people at the top of the organization, but leaders exist everywhere within organizations. If the leaders of those organizations made the pledge, no law, no action, nothing of any kind will we permit our business to do that will harm the future of our children. Can you imagine, Mac, what would be the impact of this? Can you imagine if all institutions of power made the same pledge? So I took this to the conferences that I speak at, business conferences, and I have for the last 14 years. And in one of them, it was hosted by the sustainability director for one of the big oil companies. And he was a very sweet and delightful, lovely man, the sort of person you would love to have been an uncle or a grandfather or something. But it was his conference, and his professional status were important to him, of course. And so I got up and I spoke about the children's fire. And after I'd spoken about it and posed the question to the audience, can you imagine what would happen? Are we to say that there is a need for a radical reorganization of the priorities that we place on our businesses, and we have to redesign to say that business will first and foremost serve all our hopes and dreams for a happy, prosperous, peaceful world? And in the process, we'll make money, of course, because money is great. Money allows things to happen. But that will not be the dream. Can you imagine what kind of society is it, I said, that would not place the children's fire at the very center of our institutions of power? And in my own mind, I was thinking it's an insane society. It's a society lost to itself. It's a society that has almost adopted a kind of death wish. A society that no longer cares for their children and the future that our actions are creating for them. So I'd spoken this, and there was a complete silence in the room. And the silence went on, and I just stood there. And at a certain point, my sustainability director friend sort of began to fidget and twitch, and suddenly he leapt out of his chair, knocked me back into my seat. I don't think he meant to, but he did that. I flopped back in the seat, and he said, "Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much, Mac, but right now we have, you and I, audience, important work to do." And at that moment, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. "Why don't you sit down? This room is full of grief, for we know that the actions of most of our businesses are compromising the future of our children. Why don't you sit down and allow this silence to continue?" So the guy said, and he was peering as I am into the lights, and he said, "If everybody thinks that would be a good idea?" Nobody spoke. And he sat down, and I stood up again. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what would happen? Were we to really grasp the mantle of leadership and say, now is a time for radical change, to orientate all our actions towards how we will produce a prosperous, peaceful, just, kind, and beautiful world? What kind of society is it that would not place the children's fire at the very center of its thinking and its actions? Now, this was those many years ago, 14 or so years ago, and things are changing fast. And some of the things that are changing fast, I believe, are taking us closer to the cliff edge. And some of those things that are happening are really quite wondrous and extraordinary. You see, leadership, in my understanding, in all the work that I have done around leadership, I have come to the conclusion that leadership really is simply a choice that people make. It's a choice that we make when we care enough about something to stand up and allow our lives to be a little less comfortable. Leadership has nothing to do with whether you're a natural-born leader or whether you have acquired the skills and competencies of leadership or whether you have a title that describes you as a leader. Leadership is a choice, and that choice is sat before us right now. A short while ago, I was contacted by the CEO of a large FMCG company, and she said, we were having this conversation, she said, you know, Mac, I believe that in years ahead, our children will be incapable of grasping the concept that business once upon a time served only the needs of profit and shareholder value. Because the principles which are, as it were, wrapped within the whole concept and idea of B corporations, in other words, businesses which have a duty to community, to environment, to social issues, to everything, and of course, being successful businesses, has become the norm. And it's certainly my great wish that that be so. And I imagine it is the wish also of most of us who go home in the evening or back home at our weekends and sit with our friends in this beautiful part of the world, dining by the Bosphorus or at the farm that we saw about a while ago in the village. In every single sphere of our lives, we're the same things that people love. Friendship and companionship, partnership, marriage, friends, children, young people, the elders, the old people, forests, rivers, beauty, in other words. Thank you very much.